Hey everyone, let's talk about what is an investment thesis and why you should have an investment thesis for every asset that you buy or you own. Okay, so what is an investment thesis? An investment thesis is the reason why you think the thing you are buying or that you're holding has value or creates value in the world somehow for humanity, and therefore will increase in value over time, which is presumably why you own it. Now, I am shocked by the number of people who own assets who have no idea what an investment thesis is, and they have no idea what the investment thesis might be for specific assets they own. So let's start with some of the broadest and biggest investment theses, whatever the plural of that word is, and work our way down. So you might be invested in the S&P 500, the Standard & Poor's 500 index of the 500 largest U.S. companies. And your investment thesis might be that you believe in America and that you believe companies are a valuable way of creating value for consumers. That's a great investment thesis. The S&P 500 has performed something like 7% per year, every year for the last 100 years. Now, it goes up and down, obviously, but over time it's performed well. And that is an acceptable investment thesis, that you believe in U.S. companies, you believe in the ability of companies to create value for people, you believe in America, you believe in diversification. So you're buying a little bit of 500 of them instead of one company. That's a fine investment thesis. Now, the value of the U.S. dollar, the government prints about 7% more U.S. dollars every year. So there is a question there of is the S&P 500 really going up 7% a year? Or is just the measuring stick, which is the U.S. dollar, going down by 7% a year? But regardless, at least it's an investment thesis. Okay, let's talk about Tesla. Maybe you believe that the future of cars is electric, and you believe for a variety of reasons that Tesla will stay the market leader in electric cars, and so you're invested in Tesla. Well, that is also an investment thesis. The thesis is humans will continue to use cars, that you believe cars will become electric for reasons A, B, or C, and you believe that Tesla will remain the market leader for reasons A, B, or C. That's an investment thesis. Okay, so let's get around to, and there's a bunch of good investment theses, and the problem is, there's a bunch of bad ones, or the bigger problem is just completely non-existent. There is no investment thesis. So, for example, in the last week or two, I've talked to people who have PP the coin, or Pepe the coin, in their crypto portfolio. What is the investment thesis for Pepe the coin? There isn't one. It's stupid. It's a meme coin. What is the investment thesis for Bonk, B-O-N-K? There isn't one. It's stupid. It's a stupid coin. What is the investment thesis for Fartcoin? There isn't one. What about for, let's see, some of the other stuff I've seen in, people's portfolio. You got PP the Frog, you've got Bonk, you've got Chill Guy. What is the investment thesis for the Chill Guy token? The answer is there isn't one. So let's get a little bit closer to home. So the problem, let's talk about, for example, Ethereum. So Ethereum has performed abysmally against Bitcoin for the last few years. That doesn't mean it's not up against the US dollar, but it's performed abysmally against Bitcoin. When Bitcoin's the gold standard, you should measure things again. Why would you measure against the US dollar when the gold standard for value retention and value appreciation is Bitcoin? So Ethereum has performed abysmally. Well, the investment thesis on Ethereum was that smart contract platforms were going to be a big deal. And then, of course, people had a lot of trouble figuring out why that was going to be the case, but let's just assume they were. But the question I always ask people who invested in Ethereum is, how do you know Ethereum's not going to be made obsolete, just like MySpace was made obsolete by Facebook, or like BlackBerry was made obsolete by the iPhone? This happens constantly in technology, and nobody could answer that question for me. Nobody could answer the question. The best answer I ever heard from anyone is that it was, quote, credibly decentralized, and that potentially the time would come when Ethereum would have an advantage because from a regulatory perspective, it would be determined to be decentralized, whereas other smart contract platforms would not. That is not an investment thesis I believed, but at least it was, the closest thing I heard anyone come up with as an investment thesis. Well, as it played out exactly as I predicted, which is ultimately that Solana is now much better performing than Ethereum. Solana has done to Ethereum exactly what I predicted something would do to Ethereum. Now, I didn't know what was going to make Ethereum obsolete or start that process. Maybe it was Cardano. Maybe it was Solana. No, again, the problem is you don't know what is going to trigger the obsolescence of one technology in favor of another technology. The question is, if you know that is give me a second here to fix the dog leash. If you know that there's a significant possibility of that, then your investment thesis has to explain why that's not going to happen. And I could not find anybody other than one person who said Ethereum was credibly decentralized and that other smart contract platforms would have a hard time claiming that. Other than that, I couldn't find anybody invested in Ethereum who had a good reason why it was not going to be made obsolete, and now it is. And the same thing's going to happen to Solana. So if you think, wow, well, now that I know that, I'll invest in Solana, guess what? I think the same thing's going to happen to Solana. So there's no reason to believe in the early days of search engines on the internet, everybody thought Alta Vista was the internet search engine. And then it was made obsolete by there was like 7 or 8 of them in a row, but I'll just use 3. Then it was made obsolete by Yahoo. So a bunch of people invested in Yahoo because they're like, good, at least we know nothing's going to make Yahoo obsolete because Yahoo already obsoleted Alta Vista. Well, then comes Google, and Google obsoletes Yahoo. And now, if you were lucky enough to invest in Google and not all the ones that came before it, then you did really well because Google ended up being the search engine that won the marketplace and has for a long time now. But again, that could have been Yahoo. It could have been Alta Vista. It could have been Ask Jeeves. It could have been a bunch of them that came before. So here we are. People are saying the same thing about Solana that they were saying about Ethereum. And I'm like, wait, okay, what is your investment thesis for Solana? And again, it usually just comes down to the number is going up and I think it's going to go up. A number going up is not an investment thesis. A number going up is a horrible investment thesis. If you are invested in something because you think the number will go up, but you don't know why the number will go up, then that is a bad investment. That is called gambling or just raw speculation that's not based on value. You should understand why your investments might go up or why you think they're going to go up. If you think they're going to go up just because they have gone up, that is a plausible explanation for something that has been going up for many decades. So if somebody came to me and said, I'm invested in the S&P 500, the US stock market, and I think it's going to go up because it's gone up for 100 years, I would say, well, at least that's a plausible argument based on the track record. But if somebody says the same thing about, I think Solana is going to go up because it went up yesterday, give me a break. That's not a track record. Something that's only lasted 3 months or 6 months or even 3 years, that is not a track record. If you've got a multi-decade track record, like the U.S. stock market with the S&P 500, okay, plausibly, I can see an argument that something will continue to go up if it's been going up for decades. But if your, sorry, cleaning my camera there. But if your investment thesis is based on a number going up that is any time frame shorter than multiple decades, then you've got to have a better reason for why there is value. So a lot of people are invested in, not a lot of people, but I run into people regularly that are invested in Solana or Cardano or XRP. And when I ask the question why, they can't seem to come up with an investment thesis. The investment thesis always falls apart. So let me run a dry run of a couple of them with you. So Solana typically goes, well, I think smart contracts are a big deal. Okay, plausibly. And then when I ask what people are going to use, smart contracts for, you typically end up in some sort of a infinite loop where it's like, well, they're going to use them for a lending platform so that they can do staking, so that they can do yield farming, so that they can do more staking, so that they can do more borrowing for more yield farming and more staking. And when I ask why anybody would actually want to do any of those things, the answer is always so that they can do the other things, so that they can get more of the token. And I'm like, this is always going to end. If someone somewhere is not doing something valuable with this token, and it's just this sort of circular economy where people are borrowing against the token so that they can do yield farming and staking, and they do more yield farming so they can do more staking, they do more staking so they can do more yield farming, and it's round and round and round, well, that's probably going to zero because someone somewhere is going to have to be doing something valuable. And in a minute here, I'll get to what is the valuable thing that Bitcoin does. Okay, so We've talked about Ethereum, talked about Solana. Cardano seems to just be losing in all categories. I mean, sorry, trees are falling in the woods. Cardano seems to just be losing. I don't see a way that Cardano makes a breakout the way Solana has in the last few days, but I don't know. I mean, Cardano just seems like a loser. But again, nobody has articulated to me, and I've had a couple people try, why Cardano is valuable. And, again, you end up with this, you end up with there just isn't an investment thesis. Like, what is the underlying value of Cardano? Why will it not be outcompeted? Why does the world really need Cardano? It's just round and round and round. So XRP I've talked about before, but I'll briefly talk about it here. Huge problem there with an investment thesis, which is it typically goes like this. Why are you invested in XRP? The answer is, well, because Ripple Labs is doing interbank transfers and international remittances. Well, I'm like, okay, international remittances and interbank transfers are valuable, but why is XRP valuable? Well, because Ripple Labs is the one that does that. Oh, well, okay, Ripple Labs is behind the XRP token, but you're telling me why Ripple Labs is valuable. You're not telling me why the XRP token is valuable, because the XRP token does not represent ownership in Ripple Labs. It's just a token. So you end up with this, you basically find out very quickly that almost nobody who owns XRP has a coherent investment thesis on why the XRP token is valuable. It all comes down to either they own it because they think the number's going to go up, which is not an investment thesis, or if you think it is, it's a bad investment thesis, or they think it's valuable because of international remittances and interbank transfers based on Ripple Labs. But again, the XRP token does not give you ownership in Ripple Labs. Ripple Labs can be wildly successful while the XRP token goes to zero. The two are independent of each other. I mean, obviously Ripple Labs owns the XRP token, but that doesn't mean the company cannot be very successful and the XRP token still goes to zero against Bitcoin. So it's just this constant problem. So what happens when an investment thesis changes? And again, I'll try to give the Bitcoin investment thesis at the end of the video. So I was invested in a company that I bought stock in 2021. And the premise of the company and the premise of my investment was the tokenization of real world assets. It was that companies would be able to use smart contracts and blockchain technology to tokenize stocks and bonds and real estate and any other real world asset. And in this case, the company had gone public on the blockchain. It was the first company that had gone public on the blockchain, and it was really cool. I liked the management team. I read their entire S1, which is their regulatory filing. It took like 20 hours or something like that to read all of their regulatory paperwork. And I made the decision that I thought this company was a good investment. So between 2021 and 2024, it became very clear for regulatory reasons that it was going to be very difficult to tokenize real world assets. And so my investment thesis changed. It went to, I believe the world is going to have tokenization of real world assets and that this company might be on the forefront of that. And here's the reasons I thought it would maintain that market position. It went from that to, I don't think the tokenization of real world assets is coming anytime soon. If it does, it may or may not be this company. And my investment thesis was either proved wrong or had changed. So what happens when that happens? Well, the answer is I sold the stock. So as soon as I got a chance, as soon as there was liquidity, meaning the company was publicly traded and I could actually sell the stock, which for a long time I couldn't. For 3.5 years I couldn't, but once I finally could, I sold it. And I used every penny to buy Bitcoin. And the reason for that was because my investment thesis on that company had changed, but my investment thesis on Bitcoin had not. My investment thesis on Bitcoin was still what it was before, and therefore it makes sense to invest in things that you still have an investment thesis on. So what is my investment thesis on Bitcoin? I've shared it a bunch of times in a bunch of videos, but for the sake of completeness, I'll share it again here. Okay, the value of Bitcoin is premised on the fact that humans need money. Money is a way of exchanging value so that we don't have to barter. We don't have to try to trade eggs for a cow, cows for a house. It's just a lot easier to trade your time and energy, meaning your labor, It's a lot easier to trade it for money, to trade eggs for money, to trade barley for money, and then just use money to buy stuff. So money as a technology is valuable to humanity, and almost nobody would disagree with that. Almost nobody. In fact, I have not talked to a single person in my entire life who thinks that humanity is going to go back to a barter system where we all just barter for what we need and nobody uses money anymore. Okay, so the investment thesis of Bitcoin is that money as a technology that keeps us from having to barter is valuable. And most importantly, that Bitcoin has better monetary properties than any other asset in the world. What I mean by that is it is more durable, it is more divisible, it is more portable, it is more fungible, it is more identifiable, it is more authenticatable, it is more, most importantly, scarce. Scarcity for money is the number one most important attribute, as long as it's good enough on the other attributes to be used as a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value. And in the case of Bitcoin, its monetary properties are essentially perfect in every way. So Bitcoin is the most scarce thing in the entire world, and it has perfect monetary properties. It is perfectly divisible, perfectly portable, perfectly identifiable, authenticatable, fungible, and divisible, durable, etc., all that. And perfectly scarce, because there will only ever be 21 million. So Bitcoin is perfect money. So my investment thesis is that humans will continue to use money as a technology, and that Bitcoin will never be outcompeted as a better money. Or at least if it is outcompeted, it will be hundreds or thousands of years from now, when there's a massive paradigm shift in how humans use money at all. So for example, if there's some alternate reality where the concept of money is holographic symbols in our heads, and nobody transacts in the real world, and everybody communicates by thought patterns and all of that. It's like, yeah, well, hypothetically, in a world where we all lay in a vegetative state and just live life through brain waves, yeah, okay, maybe there's a different sort of money in that world because, I don't know, but maybe not. Maybe it's still Bitcoin. But if there's a radical change, then hypothetically, there could be a currency that goes with a completely new paradigm for how humans live and behave. But I don't see that happening for at least hundreds of years, probably not thousands of years, and probably not ever. I don't think we will ever live in a world, people may end up on Mars, but it's not going to be that many of them. So I believe for thousands of years, humanity will live on planet Earth, and that we will use something as money, and that we will spend most of our time awake, aware of the world around us, and with a need to buy food, clothing, transportation, shelter. And in that world, it's Bitcoin. And I think that's going to be the case for thousands of years, and probably until Jesus comes back one day. Okay, so that's my investment thesis for Bitcoin. I'll try to explain it in the shortest way possible. Money as a technology is valuable. Bitcoin is a better money. So if money as a technology is valuable and Bitcoin is a better money, then Bitcoin will be extremely valuable. That is the investment case and the thesis of Bitcoin. Now, there's a bunch of others. I mean, you could go, I could give you much more complex explanations. I could go into all sorts of, other details. But at its core premise, the premise of the value of Bitcoin is that money is valuable. Money as a technology, as a tool, as a utility for keeping us from having to barter is valuable. And that Bitcoin is a better money. It has better monetary properties than anything else that exists in the world. And it has their credibility. I mean, ultimately what it comes down to is not what are the monetary properties of something, but what is the credibility of those monetary properties. So not just that there will be 21 million Bitcoin that ever exists, but how certain are we that there will only ever be 21 million? And I am absolutely certain for all the reasons I've covered in other videos. So the credibility of Bitcoin's monetary properties far surpass any other asset by a million miles. It's just way better money. And humans have a need to store value and transact and, ultimately long-term, a unit of account to keep track of things, monetary assets. And Bitcoin is just better at that than anything else in the world. It's a better store of value right now. It is a better medium of exchange in a lot of circumstances, and eventually it will be for all circumstances. And eventually it will be used as a unit of account, even though that is rarely done today. Businesses do not typically keep their books in Bitcoin terms, but one day that will become more prevalent, and that is always the last phase of adoption with a new money. is to use it as a unit of account. So that's the investment thesis on Bitcoin. So to recap all of this, if you own an asset, it should have an investment thesis attached to it. Meaning, when you get asked the question why you own it, the answer should not be because you think it's going to go up, or you think it's going to go up faster than Bitcoin, or you think it's going to go up faster than Bitcoin and then you're going to sell it and buy Bitcoin. Those are not good investment theses. You need an investment thesis about why this thing is valuable, why it will retain its value, and why. The key word here is why. So if you own Solana, XRP, Cardano, if you own any of these things, you need to know why you believe that thing is valuable, why it will remain valuable, and why it will not be outcompeted by some other technology. And if you can't answer those questions, you should dump whatever it is and buy Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has a very clear thesis, investment thesis. The investment thesis of Bitcoin is very clear, very straightforward, and it does not require a rocket scientist. The investment thesis behind that is attempted to be made for XRP and Solana and, Cardano and all these other things, in my opinion, is very shaky, very weak, very poorly articulated by virtually anyone I know who owns these things. And therefore, just like I predicted Ethereum would slowly march to zero against Bitcoin, which is exactly what has happened, I'll predict the same for Solana and Cardano and XRP. I think they're going to slowly march to zero against Bitcoin. And so if they're slowly marching to zero against Bitcoin, which doesn't mean they won't be up in the near term, that doesn't mean they can't be up for a day or a week or a month or a year, or even multiple years. It just means in the long term, which is what the only thing that matters for investing is the long term. In the long term, Bitcoin will ultimately outperform them, meaning it makes more sense to own Bitcoin than any of these other assets. So if you own any of these assets, please think to yourself, do you have an investment thesis? Do you know why this asset is valuable? Do you know why it will go up for the long term? Do you know how much of that asset is owned by what parties? You just got to know that. If you don't know that, then you're going to end up upside down. So one last bonus thing I'll throw out here, just because it happened in the last 48 hours, is the Trump coin. So Donald Trump released the Trump coin. Now, so, of course, inevitably, somebody messaged me. I don't know why people always message me. Every time there's something new in crypto, somebody messages me asking if I'm interested in it. And I'm like, what about any of the hundreds of videos I've done would lead you to believe that I'm interested in anything other than Bitcoin? I have no idea. But inevitably, somebody messages me, ooh, did you see Donald Trump released the Trump coin? Are you going to buy any? And of course, I'm like, no, it's stupid. Don't buy it. And so the question is, of course, the people who are buying this thing have no idea. I mean, their investment thesis is they think Trump has a loyal following and will buy the coin. Okay, I mean, that's plausible. But the problem is they have no idea what's going to happen because the Trump organization owns 80% of all the coins. So the marketplace is basically playing around with 200 million of these coins right now. And the Trump organization has 800 million of these coins that they're going to, that they have the legal right to dump on the market over the next 3 years, which is a classic pump and dump scheme where, basically somebody retains a massive amount of something, they pump the price way up, and then they use everybody else as their exit liquidity. Exit liquidity is the people you sell something to when you're exiting the market. So my prediction is that it will go exactly as predicted, which is that the token may go up in the near term. Who knows? Anything can go up in the near term. As I've said before, when the tide comes in, the first thing to float is styrofoam cups. The trash always floats faster than the real thing. It takes a long time for the tide to lift the boats because the boats are heavy. The boats are real. They require a lot of water under them for the boats to rise. But the trash floats immediately. So the trash can float for a long time. So that doesn't mean the Trump coin won't go up, in the near term. Maybe it's hours, maybe it's days, maybe it's weeks. I don't know. But the question is, what are the fundamentals? So it's like, well, it's not a good monetary asset. It's clearly a meme coin. Everything on the website for the Trump coin says, this is a meme coin. This is not an investment. This is not an investment. This is a meme coin. Basically, you're buying this because you're goofing off. Okay. Now, your investment thesis may attempt to be, and this is a very bad investment thesis, that you're going to buy it, it's going to go up, and then you're going to sell it to some sucker who's a bigger sucker than you, who buys it from you at a higher price. But again, that's not an investment thesis. That's a number go up thesis. And number go up is a bad thesis. Your thesis should never be that something has gone up and you think it's going to go up more, or that something went down and you think it's going to go back up. The importance of an investment thesis is you know why that is. So why is there a greater fool that's going to buy your Trump tokens from you at a higher price than you paid for them? And the answer is you don't know. You're just hypothesizing that you're smarter than the next guy and that the next guy will buy your Trump tokens, and then you'll end up with US dollars and they'll end up with Trump tokens that end up going to zero. Because there's no way a meme coin is long-term sustainable. I mean, by its nature, especially with 80% of the supply, 800 million of the billion coins able to be dumped on the market over the next 3 years, there's no possible way that any market can absorb that much dilution. And so the price is going to inevitably, in the long term, go way down. And if you want to see an example of something that had a lot of hype behind it, look at the Miami coin. The city of Miami had its own coin called Miami coin. And the Miami coin did exactly what I would predict Trump coin did, which is it went up and up and up until it went down and down and down and basically went to zero. Or look at the Satoshi Island coin. Exactly the same thing. It went up and up and up until it went down and down and down and went to basically zero. Everything trends to zero against Bitcoin. Everything marches towards zero against Bitcoin. And I think something like the Trump coin, it can only go up as long as it's going up. And people are saying it's going up, it's going up. Basically, the hype train can only last so long. Eventually, the hype train runs out. And as soon as you run out of new buyers to drive the price higher, it crashes and goes to zero. Now, the reason Bitcoin doesn't crash and go to zero is because if the price starts coming down on Bitcoin, the underlying fundamental value is so strong on Bitcoin that it always comes back. And so Bitcoin has gone through, in its lifespan, 4 times where the price dropped by more than 75%. 4 times. Now, if anything like Trump coin or Solana or Cardano or XRP dropped by 75% 4 times, they're gone. Like most of them couldn't even handle once. Because if it did it once, people would say, well, my investment thesis was that the number was going to go up, which again is not a real investment thesis. But if they think it is, and the number starts going down, the party's over. Bitcoin always bounces back and always comes back stronger. And right now is at, $105,000 a coin, something like that. And the reason Bitcoin does that is because the underlying fundamental value is so incredibly high that no matter what the price correction, it eventually always comes back, which makes it a fantastic investment because you're investing in the underlying value of Bitcoin as a monetary asset, which practically guarantees it always comes back, which is not the same for Solana, Cardano, XRP, Trump coin, or any of these other things. So you need an investment thesis. If you own an asset, you should have in your mind, I'm not saying you have to write it down, I'm saying in your mind, you should understand, why do I own this asset? And if your investment thesis changes, as mine did with the company that I bought stock in 2021, then you got to ask yourself, why do you still own it? And in my case, I didn't. I sold the stock when the investment thesis changed. And when I had a chance to sell the stock as a result, I sold it and bought Bitcoin because my investment thesis in Bitcoin had gotten stronger, even as my investment thesis in the in the company that I had bought stock in 2021, even as that investment thesis changed or was invalidated, my investment thesis on Bitcoin got stronger, much stronger in that intervening time. And therefore I used all of the proceeds to buy Bitcoin. So you should have an investment thesis. Almost none of the stuff in crypto has an investment thesis, meaning the vast majority of things that were invented using or attempting to mimic Bitcoin's technology, almost none of them are a good investment because none of them are money. And blockchain technology is primarily valuable for money. For most other things, blockchain technology is not a very good technology. You really only need blockchain technology for something that absolutely positively has to be decentralized, meaning you cannot have a central authority controlling it, and that if you have a central authority controlling it, it undermines its value. And money is one of the very, 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 very rare examples of that. So maybe the value of the Solana, blockchain, smart contracts, is that you can launch meme coins. And maybe the value of a meme coin is that people can gamble. Okay, but that means you're gambling on Ethereum so that you can gamble on meme coins, which is not investing, it's gambling. So whatever you own, whatever you're planning on buying, you should have an investment thesis. That should be very clear in your head. If you want to sanity check it against somebody, just send me a Facebook message with either your written investment thesis, or you can record it. If you just hold down the record button and slide your finger up, it'll lock it. Actually, I think it locks by default. I think you can just hit the record button and start talking. Send me your investment thesis. If you have an investment thesis for some asset other than Bitcoin, I'd love to hear it. And I'm happy to send you back my critique. I'm probably going to be critical because I've heard so many bad pitches on why crypto this and crypto that's going to be valuable. So I'm probably going to be critical, but I'm happy to be completely honest with you of what I think, of my critique of your investment thesis for Cardano or Solana or XRP or anything else you own that you somehow think is going to outperform Bitcoin. I'm going to tell you I'm going to disagree in advance. But look, at least you'll hear my sort of rebuttal to your investment thesis. And if mine is convincing, great, I've saved you a bunch of money. If it's not convincing, well, good for you. At least you've done the due diligence of bouncing the idea off me. So I am here to serve everyone. Please do not own assets with no idea why. If you own an asset, please understand why you think it's valuable, why you think the price will go up as a result of actual value, not just because the price went up, so it will keep going up. And if you do that, you will make a lot smarter decisions and are much more likely to not lose money investing in whatever it is. And again, you know my opinion. Bitcoin is by far the best investment of the, century or multiple centuries. And I think it's amazing. And I think the world will one day be on a Bitcoin standard and Bitcoin will be the monetary system of the world. So I'm happy to be here for you on that journey. And I'm here for anything you need. Thanks and have a great day, everyone.